To be an effective criminal defense counsel, an attorney must be prepared to be demanding, outrageous, irreverent, blasphemous, a rogue, a renegade, and a hated, isolated, and lonely person. Few love a spokesman for the despised and the damned. I'm Shooey, and this is Strangeful Things.
Sheltering in place is not advised, as your survival cannot be ensured in that scenario.
Love has practically caused me to just get you destroyed.
Unsolved, unresolved, and super complicated.
Strangeful Things.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Strangeful Things. I'm Shooey, and I'm your host this week, and I'm here with Mells and the lovely Acadia. How the hell are you all doing?
Well, I'm doing wonderful because I found a new obsession on TikTok, and it is the meatball song. And it goes, meatballs, zoo, 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 zoo. Meatballs, come to me, doo, doo, doo. Meatballs. And I've now renewed my love for meatballs.
Yep.
I gotta get on TikTok. Damn.
My favorite meatball videos are when they do them with cats. And it's just cats looking at them while they're singing the meatball song.
Did you ever see the one where the sound clip is someone answering a phone and they go, "What? Today? Fine. The Queen is coming." But they use their cat for the phone.
Oh, yes. I love that one, too.
Yeah.
I spend way too much time on TikTok. Oh, man.
TikTok is some good shit. Well, that's new. That's a good thing to have and share with everybody.
Yeah.
That is.
You should put a link to that sound in the show notes.
Well, I just sang
so people
it for
can
you.
Watch. No, I know, but then they can see. Zoo, zoo, zoo. Zoo, 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 zoo.
Wonderful.
I, for my part, had a job interview, so that was good. And I didn't start it out with going, "Hey, fuck nuts."
Always a good start.
So I figure that I'm ahead of the game already.
True.
So watch
when
out.
You can get to the first question and still be in the running.
Yep.
You know you're doing something right.
And then apparently my internet got all shitty in the middle of it, and I froze. But then I came back, so I saved it.
All right.
Thank goodness.
So that would have been a tragedy. And I also found out that a friend of mine texted me and said, "We met 19 years ago tomorrow." And it was true because I met him when I was going to a client on September 11th in New York.
Oh, wow.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't think of a new and good, so I'm just going to.
What are you talking about? You have huge news.
All right. What, I have to share? I don't share about my life. I'm very secretive.
She was going to be my neighbor.
Well, it depends on how you define neighbor.
Acadia
I'll
does
be
have a
in the
nice
Charlotte
pool.
area. I haven't worked anything out yet. At some point, I'll be in the Charlotte area.
That's right.
I decided to stay in the position I'm in now instead of taking a new position at another firm, and it was a tough decision, but I think it's the best one. And I'm pretty psyched to live further than 25 miles from where I spent my whole life, pretty much, for the first time ever, other than when I was at college. And then I was only 50 miles from home.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
Hooray.
He's growing up. Our boy's growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I'm just wiping away my tears.
Yes. That's a traumatic thing, but it's not as traumatic as being a little kid and getting murdered by some jerks.
Ain't that the truth?
Thanks for bringing it back in, Acadia.
Yeah, that's my job.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to the exciting conclusion of the tale of Leopold and Loeb, a couple of rich douchebags from the Roaring Twenties who tried to execute the perfect crime. Their perfect crime being the murder of a 14-year-old boy, Bobby Franks, who you may remember was Dickie Loeb's cousin. And as we heard last week, the execution of this crime was not exactly perfect. Here's Acadia to bring you all up to speed.
Leopold and Loeb were a couple of college friends from the ritzy Kenwood section of Chicago's South Side. They both came from super wealthy families and were allegedly super smart. After all, Leopold had over a 200 IQ, and Loeb graduated from the University of Michigan at the age of only 17. Leopold had a crush on Loeb, and Loeb was, up until the murder, a petty criminal. Vandalizing, setting fires, and stealing were a few of his favorite things, but he became bored with them over time. The two decided to pull off the perfect crime, the kidnapping, ransoming, and murder of a boy. After 7 months of planning, when the boy they had planned to take was not where they expected him to be, they just grabbed the next candidate they saw. In this case, it happened to be Loeb's cousin, Bobby Franks. They lured him into a rental car and bludgeoned him with a chisel. Then they shoved a rag in his mouth and taped it shut to shut him up. He ended up dying of asphyxiation. They dumped his body in Indiana, in a pipe, near Lake Michigan. The next day, before they called the Franks family with instructions for the ransom, the boy's body was found. So much for their big plan.
And as we all, thank you, that was very good. And as we all discussed last episode, this was a pretty shitty attempt at perfection. Between the whole changing victims thing, the exposed dump site for the body, and a bunch of other stuff that we'll talk about shortly, it was far from perfect. The murder became a nationwide storyline. A child, a white child no less, from a wealthy family, brutally murdered for seemingly no reason. There were questions about like, oh, what's going on in society? Are we moving too fast? You know, and this was starting to spread across the whole nation. You know, since the turn of the 20th century, people had to get used to a lot of shit changing. There were people driving in cars now, flying in airplanes, radio. There was a world war, the first true pandemic, and probably the hardest thing that for them all to comprehend, women could now vote.
Yeah, geez. Women voting, huh?
The audacity.
It's like, and they're still making a big deal. And what is this? It's 100 years later, and they're still making a big deal out of the fact, because it is a big deal that women get to run for stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, we're fucking fucked up. Anyways,
Backwards.
the act which created a stir far beyond this country is so frightful, psychologically so incomprehensible, so singular in its unfoldment, that if a Poe or a writer of detective stories wished to unnerve his readers, no better tale could be invented. No knot harder to unravel. No events could follow each other more effectively than life, or rather disease, has here woven them together. Maurice Erskine from Leopold and Loeb, a psychiatric psychological study.
The Illinois State's Attorney, Robert E. Crow, was put in charge of the prosecution. Now, Crow had a lot of political aspirations. He had dreamt of eventually becoming mayor of Chicago and maybe even the governor of Illinois. He'd prosecuted major cases before. What are you laughing about?
I bet his campaign slogan was, "Caw!"
Good one.
He had prosecuted major cases before, but he had a feeling this one was going to make him famous. Now, Crow and the police were initially focused on a teacher from Bobby's school, and they used some classic police interrogation techniques to get him to confess, meaning, of course, that they beat the crap out of him until he did. Only he didn't actually end up confessing, but what he did end up doing is suing the city for the police having crushed his fingers.
Oh, wow.
Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to open this door. You're going to put your hand in it, and then I'm going to close it repeatedly until you confess.
Until you tell me what I want to hear.
Shouldn't we have taken his fingerprints first? Well, it's too late now, isn't it?
Whew. Now, as far as the murderers were concerned, they may have ended up not getting the money, but for the most part, they were feeling pretty good about themselves. Loeb even pretended to help the police by supplying them with leads throughout their investigation.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, exactly. But fortunes were about to turn for our two murderers. You see, when the police examined the area around where Bobby Frank's body was found, they discovered a pair of horn-rimmed tortoiseshell eyeglasses. Originally, they thought the glasses belonged to Bobby, but they didn't fit. They then wisely deduced that perhaps they belonged to the killer. And after some pretty solid detective work that it did not involve any beatings, they figured out that
Thought
these
you said
glasses,
it was solid.
not as solid as my fist.
That's right.
They figured out that these glasses had a new type of hinge on them that had been patented by a local eyeglass store called Almer and Cole. And when they went to the store, they discovered that only 3 pairs of glasses with that frame had been sold. Mells, would you please take us through our potential suspects?
Well, I'd love to. Suspect number 1 was some guy who had been out of the country for weeks, including the time of the murder. The second potential suspect was a woman, but because women are so sweet and dainty, she was quickly ruled out as a suspect.
She was too busy voting.
Yeah. She wasn't burning her bra yet, though, so...
Yeah.
Now, suspect number 3 was some creepy know-it-all college kid named Nathan Leopold. And now, who out of them could have done it, right?
I wonder. Well, what's with immediately discounting the whole idea of the woman potentially doing it? Like, after all, it was only like a 14-year-old kid. It's not like a woman couldn't overpower him or something. Yeah.
Well, my favorite...
Did they just think that women were so, like, sugar and spice that, there was just no comprehending that it would even be possible?
Well, my favorite female serial killer, Eileen Wuornos, was not sweet and dainty at all, so... But she wasn't also after 14-year-old kids. She was after men, grown-ass men.
Yeah.
I think that a grown-ass woman could take a 14-year-old if need be. But since we're in the 20s, number 1, it would be a dame.
Yeah.
Number 2,
Tomato.
If she was particularly attractive, she would be a doll.
Ugh.
And if she was an idiot, she'd be a dumb Dora.
That's terrible.
And also, another thing that they said, when they wanted somebody to give them a cigarette, they'd say, "Butt me."
Women weren't saying "butt me."
We also, yes, they were butt me. They were always talking about like how bad the cops are, and we talk about it a lot. But this actually was legitimate. They did a good job because they could have went, "Poor kid, he's dead and his glasses don't fit."
I know.
Exactly.
Hey, if the glasses don't fit, you must have quit.
Exactly.
Maybe he shrunk somehow or something after he died.
Poor kid, his glasses were so big he couldn't see out of them. He never saw him coming.
That's how he ended up in this situation.
That's right. If he'd had contacts, he'd be alive today.
Contacts in 1924.
Yeah, but they were actually the same thickness as glasses. They just shoved them directly into your eye.
Like actual pieces of glass shoved into your eye.
That's some good science.
That's some good seeing right there.
There you go. Well, on May 25th, 1924, Crow decided they had enough evidence, and Leopold was brought in for questioning. He immediately professed his innocence. He told police, and I'm sure quite smugly, that his glasses must have fallen out of his coat or when he was bird watching. And as we said earlier, Leopold was a renowned ornithologist, so he could have been telling the truth as far as the police knew. Now, perhaps the glasses weren't even related to the crime. Leopold had a detailed alibi for that night, the night that Bobby Franks was taken. He told police that he and Loeb had gone out cruising for a couple of tomatoes in his, meaning Leopold's car. And like we said earlier, they did do this, but not until after they came home from dumping the body and cleaned out the rental. Now, this initially satisfied Crow and the police for the moment, so they let him go. But while they were interviewing him, Crow had sent some police officers to Leopold's house to see what they could find. And they didn't find a ton of stuff, but they did find some very interesting pieces of evidence.
First, they found typewritten notes in Leopold's law notes that matched the type on the ransom note. Wait, he didn't even start law school yet. Why the hell did he already have notes? Fucking freak.
Oh, okay. Well, wait a minute now. So he's a freak for doing some advanced reading for law school, but not for killing a little boy for the hell of it?
He could be a multifaceted freak.
Okay.
Now, evidence-wise, as I said, they found type notes that match the ransom note. What did they bring the ransom note with them? How did they know?
I don't know. They must
But
have
the
brought them
typewriter
back.
they found in the house. Oh, look, this is in capital letters. It must be the same. But the typewriter they found in the house was not a match. They also found letters Leopold had written to Loeb in October 1923. These would become known as the cocksucker letters.
Oh, Lord.
Letter. There was only one. And the forgiveness letter. And who better to read from the cocksucker letter than... Well, what the fuck? Fine. All right. I do not wish to influence your decision either way, but I do want to warn you that in case you deem it advisable to discontinue our friendship, that in both our interests extreme care must be had. The motif of a falling out of a pair of cocksuckers would be sure to be popular, which is patently undesirable and forms an irksome but unavoidable bond between us. Therefore, it is, in my humble opinion, expedient, though our breach need be no less real in fact, yet to observe the conventionalities, such as salutation on the street and a general appearance of at least not unfriendly relations on all occasions when we may be thrown together in public.
That's the cocksucker letter?
That's a part of it.
Yeah, but
It's much longer.
If Leopold sent me that and I was Loeb and got it, I would immediately go over and say, you use too many commas and are extremely verbose. Anyway, talk had begun. Apparently, talk had begun sometime earlier in their circles about Leopold being gay.
Oh,
Probably
not
started
that.
by the fact that Leopold was gay.
Yeah, it may have started by that.
Yep, believe it or not. And it seemed this was something both Leopold and Loeb worried about. Now, this was America in the 1920s. Being gay was illegal still most everywhere, and Leopold was planning on attending Harvard Law School in the fall of 1924. He even had notes. The letter was apparently written in response to the guys being caught in Leopold's room with the door locked.
Uh-oh.
Leopold, well, that's because they were planning a murder. Anyway,
Yeah.
Leopold was so distraught and
That
worried.
was the excuse they used. No,
Right?
we were planning a murder.
That's actually works out better for us. It's less illegal to murder someone.
Exactly.
Leopold was so distraught and worried that Loeb would leave him, he even enclosed another note explaining why they were locked in the room for Loeb to show anyone who inquired about
This
them.
is crazy.
Hey, what were you doing in that room? I have a note.
I have a note.
I, Nathan F. Leopold Jr., being under no duress or compulsion, do hereby affirm and declare that on this day, the 9th day of October, 1923, I, for reasons of my own, locked the door of the room in which I was in with Richard A. Loeb, with the intent of blocking his only feasible mode of egress, and that I further indicated my intention of applying physical force upon the person of the said Richard A. Loeb, if necessary to carry out my design, to wit, to block his only feasible mode of egress. Oh my God, this guy is so... the fucking... The language.
How many times have you used the word egress in your life? And you used it
Never.
twice in one paragraph.
Is that why is that how they measured IQ back then? It's like, how many words can you use to say something that would take, I locked him in so he couldn't get out.
That's all I had to say.
Oy. The forgiveness letter was written the day after the cocksucker letter. Loeb, upon reading the cocksucker letter, let Leopold know that he still wanted to be friends with benefits, I guess. The forgiveness letter is mostly Leopold thanking Loeb for agreeing to stay together. This is also the letter between... Who's asking for this letter?
I don't know. And it's long. It's super long. And it's the day after the other one.
So, like, if they were walking through the hall and one of their friends went like, "Hey, you're gay." Oh, am I? Excuse me, allow me to read this long ass letter. Like,
let me show you this card that was printed for me.
It's like challenging to a duel without the glove. He just pulls out the letter and slaps him in the face with it. Please read this letter.
Well, it also discussed the Superman thing. It's actually the source of the quote from the opening. So think about that long, convoluted thing in the opening of the first episode.
Yeah.
This should have been an email.
The evidence was beginning to really point to Leopold and Loeb, but Crow still needed more. The idea of the men being a couple confused him. If they were gay, why were they out looking to pick up women? Again, being the 1920s, people didn't have much of an understanding of things like bisexuality or sexual fluidity or hell, I don't fucking understand most of that shit. But the idea of if they're gay, why would they have been the women really was something that Crow concentrated on. And it made him really question his story. You know, after all, Crow was hoping to make this a capital case, hanging being the method used in Illinois at the time. Anyway, remember that dopey chauffeur from the first half who didn't notice the blood when they were cleaning out the car? They used the red wine excuse. Well, he did remember something. Yes, Chesterfield. Yeah. He did remember something. He remembered that Leopold's car was in the garage on that night, the night of May 21st, until 10 p.m. He remembered this specifically, that it was that night, because our genius, Leopold, had him look at the brakes that evening because they were making noise. So again, we have Leopold doing something that draws attention to what he's doing during this time frame.
Oh my!
Listen, old man, can you check my brakes? There seemed to be some young boy shoved in there.
Exactly. So this is actually a question that there's been a lot of debate about over the last 100 years, and if he really was as smart as they say he was, like say he did have a 200 IQ, these mistakes, do you think that he's definitely sabotaging himself, or he's just got such a closed life he just doesn't he fucks up regular people stuff?
No, he's just book smart. He's not common sense
Right, that's
smart.
what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like you can be book smart and have zero common sense, which is obvious in this case right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, but I guess the other way around is not better. You know what I mean? Like having a lot of common sense and well, I think we should do this. And then, because if you just have common sense, then you can't accept any follow-up questions.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I think you need kind of a balance. But on the whole, really smart people that are just like, I don't know how to buy milk are super annoying. Although I like the idea of smart people that just buy all the same clothes like Bert and Ernie, so they don't have to think about what they wear.
That's genius.
I just read something about that the other day.
So Bert and Ernie were obviously geniuses.
Yeah, they were ahead of the curve. And Fred Flintstone.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody on the Flintstones.
Well, no, that's different. Fred Flintstone they didn't have many copies of one thing. They just had one thing.
That's true. That's true.
Very different. Very, very different.
Only one
Well,
tiger
we've seen-
skin. That's it.
Bert had pigeons and they paid rent, so they must have had money, even though they didn't
True.
work.
Okay, we seem to have veered a little bit away from what we were talking about, and
We were talking about smart people.
it's weird.
Bert
It's
is
weird how
smart.
much you remember Bert and Ernie.
What?
I
not
love
weird.
Bert and Ernie.
You don't think it's weird that you remember something from 45 years ago?
Well, I think it's weird maybe for Acadia, not for someone with a young child like myself.
That's what I mean. I'm specifically talking about
Maybe because
him.
I'm not a drug addict, my mind is fertile.
Fertile. Oh my God.
That's right. Allow me to write you a long letter about how we don't get along.
Only if you type it on a typewriter.
I will type it on a very conspicuous looking one too.
Good. All right. Well, they brought Leopold back for questioning and hit him with the 1-2 combo of the letters and the chauffeur. He still denied everything. So they brought in Loeb. And here is a brief reenactment of a small part of the interrogation with Acadia playing State's Attorney Crow and Mells playing Richard Dickie Loeb.
And while I cannot tell you how excited I am to do this, we're going to have to do it right after this short break.
All right.
Based on the evidence, a different kind of true crime podcast.
Mom, what are you doing?
I'm trying to figure out how to do a promo ad for our podcast.
Promo ad? Don't we just talk about what we do? Why don't you just do that?
I don't know. What do you think makes ours different?
Well, the fact that we have a suspect and give all the details of the trial rather than focusing on cold cases.
That's true. Trying to figure out if they were found guilty or not guilty is my favorite part.
Don't you think we should mention the website? We should mention the website.
Right. Basedontheevidence.com, where they can find links to all their favorite podcast platforms.
We'd also need a tagline. Oh, based on the evidence, solving crimes since just now.
Now, isn't it a fact? Wednesday, May 21st, sometime between 1 and a quarter after 1, you drove up to the garage, to Leopold's garage, you driving your mother's car, that green Cadillac, he driving the red car. And then he said to the chauffeur, "The brakes squeak so much here, I want you to fix them." He says, "I can put some oil on them and you can use the emergency, and if you are careful, you will not run into anybody." He said, "I would rather run into somebody than have that squeak." And he turned the car over to the chauffeur and got into your car and drove away.
No.
That's not a fact?
No.
If the chauffeur says so, he's a liar.
Yes.
Although he has a particular reason for remembering.
It is not a fact.
If the chauffeur took the car and oiled it up, oiled the brakes and fixed it up, that would make an impression on his mind, would it not?
Yes.
If he says that's a fact, is he a liar or mistaken?
Yes.
All right, time out.
Doesn't even make sense.
No.
Since he
That is
asked
what
him
he
two
said.
questions and his answer was yes, that means he's therefore confessed to the crime. Then if he has an additional reason for remembering the particular day, what would you say to that?
Well, I would say he was still a liar or mistaken.
Then you boys come back then somewhere around 10 o'clock in the evening and take that red car out?
Well, when is all of this?
Wednesday, May 21st, the day this boy disappeared. That's not true?
No.
The chauffeur is mistaken?
Yes.
You and Leopold belong to the same fraternity.
No.
You're not fraternity brothers?
No.
Who gave me these notes? No. When I asked you last night about the letter he wrote you in which he said it would not do for cocksuckers to fall out,
Yes, sir.
what significance do you attach to that?
Well, the fact that he wanted to say that a rumor had gotten around that he was a Cocksucker.
So there you have it. Crow hit him with everything. He hit him with the car, the cocksucker letter.
He hit him with a car. Damn it,
Hit him
confess!
with a cock. I just think it's funny that Loeb's response was, I guess, that rumor had gotten around that he was a cocksucker.
Yeah.
Because it sure as hell wasn't my cock he was sucking.
Right.
I think that entire interrogation, is that like, you got that right from transcripts?
Yeah, that was direct transcripts.
Crow is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
Oh, so what you're saying is the chauffeur is a moron? The chauffeur is a liar? Did the chauffeur kill the boy? That's good enough for me.
Exactly.
Good day, sir.
You're free to go.
He's got no follow-up other than, oh, so he's lying? All right.
Oh, so you're trying to tell me that old Chesterfield is lying?
No, Chesterfield.
Sir, I would never lie. All right.
That squeaky boy was jamming those brakes, wasn't he?
Oh, gosh.
So they kept the boys, or the men, separated for hours, just nonstop questioning. And we know from last episode that this became a trial of the century. So we know somehow it's going to trial. So what do you two think is going to happen? And I'll give you all the possible scenarios. And I want you guys to kind of guess or figure out, because I'm sure nobody read ahead, what happens. So you think Loeb confesses or Leopold confesses? Do you think they turn on each other? Do you think Loeb points to Leopold or Leopold points to Loeb? Do you think they both turn on each other? Or do you think they actually are men and stand pat and don't confess and it goes to trial based on evidence?
All right, Mells, I'm inclined to think that they didn't confess to anything because they still think that they're smart enough to beat it at trial.
Okay, I think that Loeb pointed to Leopold.
Well, all right.
Okay, we've got our verdicts in.
All right, so they turned on each other, but Loeb was the first to cave.
Yay!
So Mel's wins.
I won! Woohoo!
Yep. Loeb claimed that he was driving and Leopold killed Franks by himself in the back seat. Leopold claimed obviously the opposite. He claimed what we learned did happen. Loeb beat the crap out of him and killed the kid. So Leopold begged Loeb to admit it was him. He couldn't stand the idea of his family thinking that he would have actually killed somebody. So to that, Loeb replied,
Momsy feels less terrible than she might, thinking you did it, and I'm not going to take that shred of comfort away from her.
Well, both men feeling that the evidence was too much to fully extricate themselves from the crime, they both admitted involvement. But like we said, they blamed each other for the actual killing. They even kind of competed for most helpful on the case against them. They took Crow to places all over the city, from the bridge where they dumped the typewriter, to the store where they bought the chisel, to the car rental place, anything related to this crime. They helped the police get evidence. And Crow didn't really care which one of them did the actual killing. He was going to charge them both. And he couldn't trust what either of these assholes was saying anyway. So he decided he was going to go after both for capital murder. And he was quoted as saying,
I have a hanging case.
He had a hanging case. So the two were ripped in the press. They were attacked, everything about them, the fact that they were idle rich looking for a thrill, that they were probably gay, and that they were Jewish. Not
that
very
couldn't
popular.
help.
Yeah, none of those things were very good in the 20s. Unlike the loving, accepting, and understanding people in today's America, people back then had trouble with gays and Jews.
Unbelievable.
Now, yeah. Now, the idea of capital murder scared both men and their families. So the Loebs brought in the man who was probably the most famous defense attorney of the day, Clarence Darrow, to lead the defense team. A lot of you, if you went to school in the United States at least, have read about one of Darrow's other cases, the Scopes monkey trial, which was the basis for the novel and the movie Inherit the Wind.
Never heard of it.
Oh,
I know. I'm sorry. I'm of a different generation. They didn't teach us that.
No, you're not. You were educated in the South, right?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. See, it's a pro-evolution thing. That's why you weren't taught it.
That's right.
That's true.
So what happened, Mells, was that this monkey was trying to explain to people that he was an ancestor of humans, and they put him on trial.
Well,
exactly. It was crazy.
Poor Scopes the monkey.
That's what it was. It was a trial about being allowed to teach evolution in school.
Oh, well, then no wonder I didn't learn about it.
Right, exactly. And Henry Drummond, the character in that movie and book, is based on Clarence Darrow, who was the lawyer who did it in real life.
Who was also the grandfather of Mr. Drummond from Different Strokes. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh.
Huh. That's something.
Yep.
Now, the press called Darrow the $1 million defense, with people believing that he was actually being paid $1 million to defend the men. In reality, he was to be paid $70,000, which, oddly enough, is worth about $1 million today. So it kind of worked out in 100 years. Darrow despised the idea of capital punishment and loved the idea of putting the death penalty on trial. So
I just thought of something.
Oh, no.
So, they go, oh, yeah, well, back then a nickel was worth a nickel back then was worth $1,000 today. What if, some dum-dum went back in time and just took a nickel and brought it to the future?
It would still be a nickel.
I would like my $999.95, please.
Well,
That's all.
Well, while Darrow possessed a keen legal mind and was always well prepared when he spoke, he put less effort into how he looked. Leopold even said that his first impression of Darrow was one of horror. Darrow showed up for their first meeting with his hair unkempt, his tie crooked, his jacket all wrinkled, and to top it off, egg from breakfast on his shirt. Oh, Acadia, that sounds like the first time I met you.
Yeah, except I was wearing the tie around my head like a Rambo headband.
That's true. That's true. The tie was not around your neck.
Mm-mm.
Now, Darrow would eventually win Leopold over, with him stating in his autobiography that if he were to be asked to name 2 men in history who came closest to preaching the pure essence of love, that he would name Jesus and Clarence Darrow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's pretty high praise from a murderer.
From a murderer, yeah.
A guy who didn't believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Don't forget that. That's the bigger crime here.
Psych.
Darrow
He's a liar.
That's an earlier commandment, so it counts more.
Okay.
Darrow figured, with public opinion being very pro-kill the 2 little fucks, that he would not leave the men's fate in the hands of a jury. So he decided to have both men plead guilty. This would technically turn the trial into a sentencing hearing, with the Judge John R. Caverly, solely responsible for passing sentence on the men. Related to this idea, Darrow said during the trial,
"Where responsibility is divided by 12, it is easy to say, away with him. But, Your Honor, if these boys are to hang, you must do it. It must be by your cool, premeditated act, without a chance to shift responsibility." So
Darrow figured it'd be much easier to sway one man than 12. But switching to a hearing did nothing to lessen the scope of this trial or hearing. It ended up still taking 32 days to hear from the hundreds of witnesses the two teams of attorneys called. The court and adjourning hallways were packed every day, and people fought to get into the courtroom. Stories about the murder and trial ran on the front page of the New York Times for 3 straight days during this trial. Something unheard of for something happening in Chicago.
Right. Well, Darrow's primary strategy was to put top alienists, that's what they called psychologists back in the day, on the stand to discuss the murderer's mental states. Crowe tried to stop the testimony, as psychological testimony was supposed to only be admissible for not guilty by reason of insanity pleas. The judge made an exception and allowed the testimony. When searching for alienists to speak, Darrow even tried to get Dr. Sigmund Freud, but he was ill at the time and could not make the trip. On the stand, the alienist painted a picture of the boys as emotionally immature, obsessed with crime and Nietzsche, abusive of alcohol, driven by abnormal sexual longings and insecurities. They even brought in a witness to testify that their behavior was affected by glandular abnormalities.
Science in the early
Glandular
1900s.
abnormalities. And remember Leopold's nanny? There were allegations that she molested the boy as a child.
Ah.
And Loeb's nanny, while not physically abusing him, drove him nonstop. She always wanted him working and learning. They stated that this form of mental abuse helped drive him into becoming the manipulative liar he had become. Darrow really threw the kitchen sink at the case. Darrow called up a number of lay witnesses for both men as well. The folks brought up to speak about Loeb described a man who was belligerent, lacked adult judgment, acted childishly, and tended to laugh inappropriately. That's the show, so.
I know. Things are not looking good for us in this trial.
Yeah, well, is somebody here a murderer? You're right. Anyways, when witnesses were asked about Leopold, they said he had a huge ego and was very argumentative. People didn't like Leopold, and most of the public thought he had killed the boy. Not helping his cause, when asked about how he felt about killing the boy, Leopold replied that it didn't concern him, stating that
it is as easy to justify such a death as it is to justify an entomologist impaling a beetle on a pin.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Now there's that Uberman shit again. They were above everyone else, including the law. And what gets me is with everything they fucked up, they continued to be cocky about it. It's fucking nuts. Acadia, how about the prosecution in this case? What was their strategy?
Crowe's strategy was to paint the two killers as soulless monsters. He figured money wasn't a motive, so he pushed that the motive was for the sake of a thrill. Crowe had a whole bunch of alienists and expert witnesses in his and the state's corner as well. He brought in the top 4 alienists in Chicago and a number of lay witnesses to contradict everything he expected from the defense. They did their jobs, undermining the defense's case.
And then it was time for closing arguments. Now, there is a lot in these that we would like to share with y'all, but it's just too fucking much. Darrow's closing remarks lasted 12 hours and took place over 3 days.
Wow.
Crowe's, while not
guilty.
Exactly.
You took too long.
And Crowe's wasn't nearly as long, but it was still long. As they do in court, you start with the prosecution first, so we'll start with Crowe's closing.
All right. So Crowe gave his closing arguments on August 27th, 1924, and he had a few themes. The first was divine providence. Crowe believed it was God who stepped in and helped get the case solved. God helped find the body so soon. God helped Leopold lose his glasses and helped the police find them. Knowing that Leopold was an atheist, he rubbed that in his face. Speaking directly to Leopold in his closing, he said, "The fool in his heart hath said there is no God. I wonder now, Nathan, whether you think there is a God or not. I wonder whether you think it's pure accident this disciple of Nietzschean philosophy dropped his glasses, or whether it was an act of divine providence to visit upon your miserable carcasses the wrath of God and the enforcement of the laws of the state of Illinois."
Woo.
Oof.
He ridiculed the defense's idea that they were mitigating circumstances for their actions by saying, Clarence Darrow calls it a mitigating circumstance. Why, when they murder a boy, they ought to be treated with kindness and consideration. If they had taken a little tot, a little girl, debauched her and raped her, I suppose we ought to give them each a medal and tell them to go on their ways.
Wow.
You
Yikes.
tell them.
Here are the rest of Crow's closing highlights. I pointed out how the men were responsible for their actions. I pointed out some of the ridiculous experts Darrow brought in, including a doctor who stated that to examine Leopold for the trial, he examined his urine.
True.
I told the judge I didn't think the boys were too young to be hanged, that they were old enough to know what they were doing. Even though they came from rich families, I stated that money was also a motive. It had come out of the hearing that Loeb owed gambling debts and did not want to get money from his parents. Yeah, because remember, there was a whole kidnap ransom thing there that they fucked up that they would have gotten to eventually had they not gotten caught.
Yeah. Yeah, they were supposed to get their 10 grand.
Mm-hmm. I said it was wrong to blame Nietzsche or their treatment by their families. They were responsible for their own actions. I finished up by pleading with the judge to base his decision on the facts and not the emotions that Darrow would stir up.
Now, Darrow delivered an impassioned plea in his summation. A survey of public address scholars ranked Darrow's closing remarks in the Leopold and Loeb case 23rd out of the top 100 American speeches delivered in the 20th century, placing it right after John F. Kennedy's Ich bin ein Berliner speech. Now, as expected, Darrow's primary talker was death penalty. Now, as I said earlier, he went on for 12 hours, often rambling and losing his place, but he did make an impassioned plea to the judge. And here's Mells with some highlights.
Well, like Shooey said, Darrow went into a 12-hour, 3-day rant blaming everything for the defendant's situation except the defendants themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, he accepted that they had done what they were accused of and that they should be punished. He just didn't want them killed. He attacked the press for glorifying the story and calling for Leopold and Loeb's heads. He blamed their wealth, stating,
We are here with the lives of two boys imperiled, with the public aroused. For what? Because unfortunately the parents have money. Nothing else.
Now, he made the plea that they were too young to kill.
Why, Mr. Savage says age makes no difference, and that if this court should do what every other court in Illinois has done since its foundation and refuse to sentence these boys to death, none else would ever be hanged in Illinois. Well, I can imagine some results worse than that. So long as this terrible tool is to be used for a plaything, without thought or consideration, we ought to get rid of it for the protection of human life.
He attacked the prosecution's call for blood.
I've heard in the last 6 weeks nothing but the cry for blood. I've heard from the office of the state's attorney only ugly hate. I've heard precedents quoted which would be a disgrace to a savage race. I've seen a court urged almost to the point of threats to hang two boys in the face of science, in the face of philosophy, in the face of humanity, in the face of experience, in the face of all the better and more humane thought of the age.
Whew, that's a lot of face.
Wow, that's a lot of face in there. He also read the cocksucker letter, as well as the little note we read y'all earlier, the one about why they were locked in a room together as evidence of Leopold's diseased mind. He said the letter showed the defendants to not be normal human beings. He argued about the Nietzschean effect on them, how thinking they were above the law illustrated their mental illness and detachment from reality. He completed his summation with the following.
I was reading last night of the aspiration of the old Persian poet Omar Khayyam. It appealed to me as the highest that can vision. I wish it was in my heart, and I wish it was in the hearts of all. So I be written in the book of love. Do not care about that book above. Erase my name or write it as you will. So I be written in the book of love.
Mm-hmm.
That was beautiful.
Oh my gosh, that was gorgeous. Oh my gosh, that was gorgeous.
Now, while we only discussed some clips from the closing remarks, I'm sure the two of you took it upon yourselves to read both summations in full.
Oh, yeah.
So based
Curled up with a
on
glass of
that-
wine in front of the fire.
3 nights in a row.
Yeah.
So based on what you heard, though, who do you think made the stronger arguments?
Oh, I mean, just because of that beautiful poem, I'd have to say it was the defense.
I mean, I think Darrow made good arguments, but I think that the whole look what they did. you can't really compete with look what they did.
No, I mean that's true. That's true.
You know what I mean? Like it's what do they say? If the facts are on you, if you don't have the facts, argue the law. If you don't have the law, argue the facts. And if you don't have either, pound the table.
Yeah.
It seems like Darrow was pounding the table a lot.
Of table pounding, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Darrow was but he was so full of like emotion.
Well, that's what he was. That was the kind of attorney he was. And he did that. Yeah. If you see the movie Inherit the Wind, he's like that in that as well.
That was also my beautiful acting that made you feel that way. It transported
stuff.
you, Mells.
Yeah, that's true.
Plus, he had to earn his $70K, and he's like, "Oh, this trial's not going bad. I told him to plead guilty. I better drag it out some so that they don't try and shave off some of my fee."
Yeah.
Well, after all of that, the judge made his decision: life for the murder and 99 years for the kidnapping. So life plus 99 for each of them. The judge would state that despite all of the expert testimony and all the lay testimony and everything else that they heard over the 32 days, the decision was solely based on the fact that they were young and he thought they were too young to hang. So regardless of why he ended up doing it, I guess they didn't need Darrow. They just needed somebody else to just be there. He did avoid the death penalty.
Without me, they would have seemed much older.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as an aside, we were talking about how much Darrow made. He had to attempt to collect his fee from the families for years, eventually settling on only about $40,000.
Oh, wow.
So these multimillionaires, had their son spared from the noose, and then they get cheap with the guy who saved them. So
yeah, because fucking rich people don't stay rich by spending their money.
Exactly.
They spend other people's money.
They were both sent to serve their terms at Illinois State Prison in Joliet. And they actually, while there, worked to reform the prison education system and enacted a high school and junior college curricula for the prisoners.
Oh, wow. So they were like Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, for a little while.
That all ended on January 28th, 1936. Loeb had his throat slit with a razor and was slashed 50 times in the shower by fellow inmate James Day.
Oh, my God.
Day claimed he was defending himself from Loeb's sexual advances.
Yikes.
Even though the prison's chaplain, Loeb's confidant in prison, came to his defense, the prison determined that Day was acting in self-defense. Those who remembered the murder of Bobby Franks praised Day, and he was eventually acquitted.
Well, Leopold's fate was quite different. He was a model inmate. He revamped the prison library. Andy Dufresne.
There he was.
Taught his fellow prisoners and helped out in the prison hospital. In 1944, he took part in a U.S. government study where he was deliberately shot up with malaria and then given a bunch of treatments. This was to help the troops serving in the Pacific. In 1958, his autobiography, Life Plus 99 Years, was released. It told of his life after the murder. It's believed that it's part of his plan to be paroled. He wanted to soften his image and show that he had changed.
And it worked. In March 1958, he was paroled. He was allowed to move to Puerto Rico to avoid the press. And there, Nate, as he was now known, worked in a hospital as an x-ray technician. He earned his master's degree and taught mathematics at the University of Puerto Rico. He published a book on ornithology. He just loved them birds. And in 1961, he married an American widow named Trudy Feldman. He lived out the rest of his life in Puerto Rico until his death from a diabetes-related heart attack on August 30th, 1971. As for Robert Crowe, failing to get Leopold and Loeb hanged cost him politically, and his career never really advanced anywhere further. And as for Darrow, he was already in his late 60s at the time and was about to call it a career anyway. He had a few major cases left in him, including the Scopes Monkey trial that we talked about earlier. That was the year after this trial.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I wonder if Leopold ever thought about Loeb longingly.
Oh, I bet he thought about him longingly a lot.
I mean, that's... I know we're not I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to be empathetic, and I'm not, but wow, what a case.
Well, I think Loeb was just a sociopath who wanted to commit crime and shit like that. Leopold was just a really troubled person, and like I don't forgive him for planning a poorly executed murder, but like you think about like if you were that smart and you don't have parents that are interested in you, you have a nanny that's fucking molesting you, you have no friends, you're incapable of talking to people because you don't think at the same level as them, like you're gonna end up fucked up.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
that you could also end up the kind of fucked up where you just write long, obnoxious letters to the newspaper about potholes. You don't have to go, what we should do.
Oh, yeah, or you could get a podcast or something like that. But
exactly.
That's what I've done. I'm talking about myself.
That way, nobody will hear us.
Yeah, I don't feel bad for them, but I can see how it could happen.
Yeah.
I think the idea that everybody started saying, "Oh, society's changing. Oh, it's too much. We can't do it." Blah. Take those people to the last 20 years we've had to fucking go through and see what's going on.
Amen, Shooey.
I went back to that part where it said, on the stand, the alienist painted a picture of the boys as emotionally immature, obsessed with crime, and Nietzsche, abusive of alcohol. I was like, I feel seen. Then driven by abnormal sexual longings and insecurities.
Define abnormal.
I could never fuck a fire hydrant. They'd never love me.
Oh. We'll
it's
still
always
love
pushing
you.
me away. It's always pushing me away.
It's always squirting water at me at high velocity.
It doesn't want to hug.
No.
Stop opening up my girlfriend to be cooled off in the summer, you city kids.
City kids. I don't know if there's any of them left.
No, probably not. So I guess that's it, huh?
That's it.
I don't
y'all.
I gotta tell you, I'm not super thrilled. I'm not super thrilled that Leopold got out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He did serve 34 years.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I don't know.
He isn't the one that killed him.
Yeah. There wouldn't have been any killing if he wasn't there.
Did you guys see the movie there's been a lot of movies this was based on, or that were based on this. One was called Compulsion, and it is, oh my God, it is hilarious. It's like a fictionalized telling of the story. It's old. And it's kind of like Reefer Madness, but like taken into account like these two guys, like the way they have them talk and everything like that.
No.
And what's
And
it
then
called?
there was a movie,
Compulsion?
Compulsion. And then there was a Sandra Bullock movie called Murder by Numbers,
I've seen that one.
which is basically
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
almost the same thing too.
The more you know.
Yeah, there was a little stretch of time that I would have watched bum fights if Sandra Bullock was in it.
That's true. Oh, so this movie that was terrible, Compulsion, I just brought it up on IMDb, starred Orson Welles and Dean Stockwell. Dean Stockwell was like 20 when it came out.
Oh, wow.
E.G. Marshall's in it. Richard Anderson from The $6 Million Man, if anybody knows what the hell that is.
Jesus Christ. No wonder our average listener is like 108.
It's like the old CBS demographic.
Oh, don't you remember Gunsmoke? Said Shooey as he
The Honeymooners.
Jesus Christ.
Great comedy.
Oh, Christ. All right, well, where are people going to be able to find us so that they can tell us what a good episode this was since Shooey did it?
Yeah. Be nice to Shooey. All right, where you can find us. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at ShooeyTime. You can find Acadia on Twitter at Acadia or on Instagram at Acadia Einstein. You can find Mells on Twitter at MellsBells84 or on Instagram at SuperficialMells. And you can also reach out to the show on Twitter at StrangefulPod.
Yes, and please take a moment to rate and review us. Hopefully we are satisfying your needs, and you can always spread it by word of mouth as well.
You can spread a lot of things from word of mouth.
Yes,
That's
you can.
Right. Remember, these good reviews really, really help. I'm specifically not talking to the people that wrote the bad reviews. For fuck's sake, if you're trying to use us to do your term paper, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
Anyway, we bitched about this more on the Patreon this week. Or the last week, rather.
I read and watched videos for this one. I did a lot of research this time.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
what
a
lot of
3 months of work will get you.
Exactly.
I watched 11 episodes of Magnum P.I. Magnum P.I. solved the Leopold and Loeb case. That's if you wanna get closer to us and have a special episode every once in a while where we just examine Shooey's TV habits, you can go to patreon.com/strangeful. And thanks for the new patron that we got last week, whose name I can't remember. That I will have to make sure that I mention next week. Yeah, there's good stuff on there, so give it a try. And I guess that's all she wrote, huh?
Yep. Count your blessings.
Keep on flapping.
Bye-bye.